The Process Podcast, breaking down the daily habits, processes, and tools of high achievers. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilson.
Hey there, boys and girls. This is Brad Wilson with the Process Podcast. As always, if you haven't yet subscribed or rated the show, please take a second. Rate the show in iTunes, however it is you're consuming this episode. Subscribe. It helps me tremendously, more than you can possibly imagine. I'm going to keep the intro brief today. Today's podcast is, I'm calling it a 0.5 episode. There's no guest. It's me telling the story of a little dude named Niles who captured my heart and brought so much love and joy to our little family. I talk a lot about reaching 1 million people, but Niles reached 4 people in such a profound and impactful way that our lives will never be the same. So without any further ado, here's my story of Niles the Cat. So I've wanted to do a standalone episode for quite some time, but it always felt like an exercise in self-absorption. And I know that I'm doing this podcast because of the wisdom that I find from my guests. And over the last week, I've had a realization that I did feel was good enough for my audience to listen to, that merited your attention, because your attention is something that I hold very near and dear to my heart, and I protect it. So I was on Twitter and sitting there typing random words that maybe sounded profound and deleting them and feeling a lot of self-loathing, and I stumbled upon something while I was doing that, and the concept is that growth equals regret. And since I had that thought that growth equals regret, and I apply it to my podcast, firstly, because I was taking a course and learning about storytelling. And as I was learning these things, all I could think of was, wow, this is amazing, incredible, and why haven't I been applying this to every single episode? I had so many good chances with amazing guests that had just incredible wisdom to share that I missed because I hadn't fully invested myself in the learning process. And so I grew, but I had regret for not being as great a host, as great a facilitator as I could have been. And the story that I want to share is the story, it's on my heart, and I don't know if this is ever going to be released, but it's the story of Niles the Cat. We got Niles a few years back. I had a really bad day playing cards, and I just had it on me. I wanted to get a cat. I told my wife, let's go look at kittens. We had an older cat, but he pretty much hated me. He didn't have anything to do with me at that time. He's since come around, and I think she knew by the way that I said it that I was serious. And so we went to the animal shelter, and we looked at these litter of kittens. They only had one, and there were 7 kittens or 8 kittens, I'm not sure. And one of them stood out. He was a little tabby cat running around like a freaking crazy animal, attacking his little brothers and sisters. And him and another one, Calico, they were standing at opposite ends of the room from one another, and they were just running into each other. Just bam, bam, just crashing. And they were having so much fun while the other ones were kind of slowly moving around. And we thought we loved them both, and we couldn't separate them because they loved each other so much. So we got 2 kittens instead of 1, and we took him home, and they became a part of our family. In my conversation with Bob Babinski, when I asked him if there was anything that he used to strongly believe but he changed his mind, and his thing was that you could love animals as much as people, and I know that in my case, that's very, very much true. They're members of the family. And Niles wasn't without quirks. Niles would purr really loud. He would stand on your chest and try to lick your nose off. And it would drive me absolutely bananas. Every single time that he tried to do it, he would try to suck my ear, and it sounded like something just god-awful when he did it. I don't know what exactly he was getting out of sucking behind my earlobe, but he loved it, and it gave him joy and happiness. And Niles and Daphne had been with us. He was less than 2 years old, and he never fought with anybody. He never showed aggression towards anyone or anything. As a matter of fact, my mom brought over a litter of kittens one time, and while Daphne hissed at them, she territorial did not want them in her space. Niles licked their heads. He played with each and every one of them. They were immediate friends. My daughters love Niles. He would lick their noses, and they absolutely loved it. They didn't care. They loved how he would purr and vibrate their body, and just always brought joy, always brought love wherever he went. And about 2 months ago, we got a fourth member of our family, Jack, who's a tripod, and which means he has 3 legs, and it was actually his foot that he lost, and it kept getting infected. So he had to have surgery, and he got the rest of his leg removed, and he's been recovering. He had a cone on for about 6 weeks, and Niles, who has allergies, was being given medicine every day for his allergies, and we kept such a close eye on Jack. He had his cone on, making sure he was okay, and in the meantime, Niles had become lethargic, and I didn't think it was that serious because he's less than 2 years old, perfectly healthy animal. He had just gone to the vet, had all of his checkups, everything was fine. And I looked up the side effects of the Zyrtec, his allergy medication, and they were lack of appetite, loss of appetite, and lethargy. And he hadn't been eating as much and had been less energetic. And so we stopped feeding him Zyrtec. We stopped letting them be outside so that he could gain some weight. And we watched him. And by Thursday of last week, he just hadn't gotten better. And so I made a vet appointment for Tuesday. And over the weekend, he had gone downhill so much that I didn't feel comfortable waiting until Tuesday. So we took him on Monday, and I dropped my wife off at school. I took this little orange dreamsicle, as my wife called him, who brought so much joy into our lives, to the vet. And they took his temperature, and his temperature was fine. He didn't have a fever. And they ran his blood work and brought him back. And the vet said, I'm sorry, but he has something that's called wet FIP. And it's 100% fatal. There's nothing that can be done. And I was just in shock. I couldn't process it. My mind didn't believe it. And I took him home. I told my wife, she was still at school, and I just spent most of the day not believing it, just in stunned shock. And he was laying on my chest. He was so weak, and he was purring. I could feel him purring, and he leaned over to my nose, this thing that was so annoying, that drove me absolute bananas. And I found myself wishing that he would lick my nose. I found myself wishing that he could have that joy and that happiness in his life just one last time, and he wouldn't do it. He was just too down. He didn't feel up to it. And it hurt. It hurt me so bad that thing that had given him so much joy, that had driven me crazy, and I had pushed him away so many times for licking my nose, was now the very thing that I prayed for, that I wished for more than anything. I wanted to give him happiness and joy, and he never did. And I found myself sitting there on the bed with my beloved cat, thinking that this is growth. I'm growing, and the regret is that I didn't let him lick my nose more. I didn't let him do those annoying things that were so much a part of him, that he didn't do them to be annoying. He did them because they made him happy and gave him joy. And the reason that I had it on my heart to tell this story about my little buddy is, number one, I don't want him to be forgotten. He made such a tremendous, tremendous impact in our life, and I hope that he can be a lesson to you in your life. There are animals, there are people that do annoying things that give them joy and give them love, and it drives you absolutely bananas. But there may come a day when they're so weak that you want nothing more than for them to do those annoying things just so they can have a little bit of happiness and a little bit of joy. And Niles brought so much love and happiness to our lives. I'm grateful for every second that we got to spend with him, and I hope that his memory will live on through this little story, through this little message, and that he'll impact more people. He'll leave a legacy, and I love him very much, and I hope that this story serves you very well. Thank you very much. Next time on the Process Podcast, author V.E. Schwab.
So I very slowly began to tie her to the chair she was sitting in, but like
oh my God.
Starting from the ground up, so she didn't quite notice it at first. And she noticed it. And I mean, look, I was like 8. I wasn't great at tying knots, but she got unsettled enough by the experience that she then locked herself on the back porch and called the neighbors. And the best part of all of this is that she then didn't call my parents, though. So my parents came home a couple hours later after she finally had come back inside the house. And they asked how everything had gone, and she was like, oh, it went fine. And then as soon as this babysitter left, the neighbors started calling to make sure that everything was okay. And my parents were like, what on earth did you do? And I was like, nothing. We were just hanging out. We were just playing games.
Don't forget to subscribe, because this is an episode you do not want to miss.